The red rosy hen greets the dawn of the day. In fact, the hen is not the bird traditionally associated with heralding a new sunrise, but Mrs. Huggs, while collecting many old folk songs for posterity, has taken care to rewrite them where necessary to avoid, as she put it, offending those of a refined disposition with unwarranted coarseness. Much to her surprise, people often couldn't spot the unwarranted coarseness until it had been pointed out to them. Sometimes a chicken is nothing but a bird. A footnote in Hogfather by Terry Pratchett. Fun fact, that last line is apparently a double reference. I only knew about the first, but it's weird that the jazz aficionado didn't know both. A pause while I explain the filthy pun because it doesn't translate to Spanish, and apologize profusely to any older family members who might see this. Today's video topic is not coarse like the epigraph, but it's no less hilarious to me. I was born and raised in the US, and British books have always been a big part of my literary diet, but I very scarcely ever had to think about the fact that sometimes British books have American editions. Maybe it's because I've always tended to read older books, which tend not to get retroactively Bowdlerized, but yeah, if I ever thought about it, I figured US editions would say cookies where the originals say biscuits. That kind of thing. Not this. As a New Yorker, I've been born and raised to be extremely sensitive to the latest correct terminology and use it as the default in any given situation. Also, as a New Yorker, I learned very early in life to recognize when the latest correct terminology is only being used in order to disguise unabated bigotry, and when someone's use of outdated terminology doesn't make that person harmful to the oppressed minority in question, and when worrying too much about politeness, the current related buzzword, its optics, dilutes one's real message. All of this to say, the American edition of the book in question, Witch Witch by Eva Ibbotson, says, Belladonna could tell each ladybird from all its fellows, call a dozen grimy sparrows on a rooftop by their names. It was as foolish to think that all dogs looked alike as it was to imagine that she couldn't tell Rover from every earthworm in the world. If you've been raised like I have, brace yourselves. The original international version, because I've been able to find Spanish and Italian translations, and they translate the following, not the previous, says...
Belladonna could tell each ladybird from all its fellows, call a dozen grimy sparrows on a rooftop by their names. It was as foolish to think that all Chinamen looked alike as it was to imagine that she couldn't tell Rover from every earthworm in the world.
You may ask yourself, what the fuck did you just read and or listen to? If you've never come across the concept of people from over there all look alike, I grew up almost entirely without it, and I can only hope that it dies out sooner rather than later, then the original phrase is gobbledygook to you, so let's start there. The field of psychology calls it the cross-race effect, and unfortunately the most entertaining example I know is a bit from Chappelle's show. Yes, as in Dave Chappelle, because I was sentient during the 2000s, and before he chose to join up with fascists for the benefits they could grant him, however short-term, I promise that he did used to use his brains for good and not evil, because I watched that show, and I still stand by the conclusion he came to with John Mayer.
Like gangbusters. But I still happen to notice some of the Latin people were nodding their heads, but they weren't really feeling it as much as I thought they would. But I think I got the remedy. What would happen if I incorporated within that an electric piano? Sanchez, go! All right, this is on break. Now I'm gonna kick it up a notch. Watch this. So what have we learned, gang? We learned that white people can dance if you play what they like, electric guitar. Of course, we the blacks can't resist drums, and Latins love congos, an electric piano with Spanish gibberish over it, I guess.
It's me. I'm Latin, folks. I listen to a fair amount of R&B, but it almost never hits right because it's missing brass and or woodwind. But yes, here's the bit.
All Chinese people look alike. So do white people. Pretty much anyone who isn't black looks alike to me.
I firmly believe that if he'd never staged a comeback and just stayed out of the public eye, he'd have died an American hero, and we'd think of him the way we think of J.D. Salinger. But the point is academic now until further notice, isn't it, Dave? All those brains, and for what? Toda su inteligencia se le fue a las patas. Now, those who've never heard of Ebba Ibbotson might wonder if she's endorsing this sentiment as some immutable fact of the human experience. But as somebody who's read Miss Ibbotson's entire bibliography, while it's more overt in her children's books, I think mainly because they were written more recently than those for grown-ups, all of them are multicultural, multiracial, and outspokenly anti-fascist. Yes, indeed, Antifa. I'll sing her praises more fully in a later video, but here I can comfortably say that her point is not that everyone of Chinese descent is easier to tell apart than dogs are, because sometimes you really wouldn't think that all dogs are the same species, whereas with humans you're never in any doubt, but rather that to find human beings harder to tell apart than dogs is silly. I wouldn't be surprised if, as has been my experience in Spanish, Miss Ibbotson referred to those of Chinese but meant to refer to everyone of East Asian descent, as in, it's as silly to think everyone of East Asian descent is indistinguishable as to think that this witch could possibly confuse one earthworm with another. I wouldn't have felt the need to belabor this social-political point a few years ago, but ever since Bean Soupgate, I sincerely can't be sure of anything anymore. On the other hand, I delight in saying that the American edition has a custom roast for us. In the original international version, a certain haughty princess is German, and when agreeing to have a spell put on her, threatens to go crying to the newspapers if it goes wrong. I grew up reading about this valley girl who threatens people with her lawyer. There was another young princess from America wearing Levi's and a t-shirt emblazoned with "I am Batman's friend." Her ancestors had left France when Louis Philippe lost his throne. The princess did not seem to be as hypnotized as the others. "This is ridiculous," she complained. "What a joke. Make me a black swan or I'll call my lawyer." You tell me which princess is funnier. I'm gonna go with Batman's friend.